A weather app is not only one of the most basic apps you can build as a developer, but also one of the most important apps you can build. This is because you will learn programming concepts such as state management, APIs, effects and lifecycle, handling user input, data transformation, and of course the most important part of your application, which is UI design. It's your lucky day because these are the exact concepts we're going to learn in this video, because we're going to complete the weather app challenge from Frontend Mentor, and here is a demo of the finished application. First of all, we have a sleek UI which has been provided to us by Frontend Mentor. Very nice. Next, we have a units toggle so that you can choose between metric units, and if you are part of the 1% of the world that uses imperial units, then you also have an option for that. We also have a search input, which will give you a drop down of the places that have the name that you have typed in, and then you can select the one that you want, and this will also update the weather that you are shown in the application, and it updates all over the application. And then we have the daily forecast and the hourly forecast as well. And last but not least, we have a loading state for our entire application. If you want access to the code that we're going to write in this video, simply check for the GitHub link in the description, which is right below the like button and the subscribe button. Let's begin. As always, to begin, I have an empty instance of VS Codium right here, and I have my terminal open, but I'm going to cd into my desktop, and then inside my desktop, I'm going to say npm create vit at latest, and I'm going to call the application weather now, and then enter. And then I'm going to select React, and I'm also going to select the JavaScript plus PD web compiler. So enter, and we're not using roll down, and then we don't want to install dependencies right away. And then once this is done, I'm simply going to restart this instance of VS Codium by saying Codium not weather now -r. So I want to open VS Codium into this folder and then restart it. And then once this has restarted, I'm going to say Ctrl J once again to open up our terminal, and then I'm going to install the dependencies by saying pnpm I, so pnpm install, which is going to install our node modules, and then we can run our application. Once our dependencies have finished installing, I can say pnpm dev or pnpm run dev, which is going to open up our dev server on localhost 5173, and this is the default Vite and React application running on localhost 5173. So to begin, I want to go ahead and install Tailwind CSS. So I'm going to clear my terminal, and then I'm going to say pnpm install, and then I want to call Tailwind CSS and at Tailwind CSS /vite. And then as these two are installing, I'm going to go into our Vite config right here, and then we're going to import Tailwind CSS from at Tailwind CSS /vite. And then right here, we want to go ahead and call Tailwind CSS like so, and then save that. And then in order to be able to use it, we jump into our source folder and then into our index.css. Right at the top, we're going to say at import and then Tailwind CSS, just like that. And then you can save that, and then when we restart our dev server, so pnpm dev, we should now be able to see the styles are going to be updated just a bit, as you can see right there. So now I want to go ahead and delete the app.css file. We don't need it. And then in the app.jsx, we can just select all that, delete it, and then say export default function app. And then let's just go ahead and return a div that says app. And you can save that, and you can see that this is what you have on the screen. Reload, and it's not on the top because of the styles that you have inside here. So let's go ahead and remove everything right here so that we only remain with the Tailwind CSS import, because we're going to be adding the styles as we go on. But you can see right there that we have our default app. You can go ahead and test out whether Tailwind is working by giving this a class name of text-4xl and font-bold. And you'll see that the styles are going to update right there. Okay, so something that I forgot to do is to download the starter files, but I did that in my free time, and now I have it in my desktop. So the zip file that I downloaded is right here. It is called weather-app main, and I'm just simply going to double click it, which is going to extract it. Now back inside my workspace, what I want to do is a bit of copying and pasting. So these are the files that we're getting from Frontend Mentor, and what we want to do is the following. We're going to copy the assets, and let's just see if we can drag and drop them. There's already an assets folder. You can delete this one, and then let's just drag and drop this inside the source. Okay, it works because inside the assets we have the fonts, and we're not really going to use this. We're going to use the the imports from Google Fonts, and we have all the images that we're going to need for our application. And then for the design, this is helpful to have, so just drag and drop it inside this workspace. Come on, highlight. There we go. So copy folder, if you get this pop-up, say copy folder, which is going to just add it into your workspace. And then for the index HTML, we don't really need this because we're going to be doing some modifications to our own, which is created by Vite. And then for the preview and the readmes and the style guide, we can just grab all of them and paste them inside here. And then we want to replace the readme that is generated by default so that we can have this readme by Frontend Mentor. And then for the git ignore, let me open this up to see if we need anything inside here. Probably we can just copy all of this, and then inside our git ignore right here, you can just paste it on the bottom and then save it. So now let's begin to type away. I think we are now ready. So let me close this. Let's place this to the right, and then let's place this to the left, just like that. And then I think we can, should we close the sidebar? No, let's first of all get the API. So the API that we're using is called Open Meteor API. And just get the link because I don't know the link offhand. I can search for it and get it, but it's right here. So submit solution, where is it? No, start challenge, right here. So this is the link right here, and then you can just click on try the API. But an example request that we're going to be sending is this one right here. So this entire thing is one request. So I'm going to click on try the API, and then I just want to show you how to work with it so that in case in future you want to work with it, then it's going to be easy to follow along. Now by default, it searches for latitude 5252 and longitude 13.41, which is Berlin. And that is the default location that we're going to be putting in our application as well. And in case you want to search for any of these properties, all you need to do is just click on them. And we're going to need quite a number of properties inside here. But since I already built the application beforehand, then I don't want to click all of them because I already have the link generated. And then once you click all the properties that you are satisfied with, all you need to do is just scroll to the bottom. And these are other properties, by the way, that you can select. And then once again, some more properties. And then once you get to the bottom right here, this is the link to the API. So this link right here contains all the properties that you have selected. So if you copy this and open it up on a new page, you'll notice that you get back this GET request from the API. So basically this is what we're going to be using to build our application. Now, like I said, I already have this generated because I already built the application. So what I'm going to do is just navigate into my GitHub and then into the FM Weather App repository, and you can get this link in the description. Now, as this is loading, and I don't even know if I have, okay, it's working. So we want to navigate into the source folder and then inside the lib right here. And inside the lib, you'll find the utils.js, and you can see that the URL is right here. Quite a long URL, as you can see. So I'm just going to keep this open because I want to be able to copy this link once we get into building out our application. So now I think we can place this to the right, and then let's begin to build out the app.jsx because that is the entry file of our application. Now remember that we already have the index.css, but we're going to be adding some more styles inside here. And then inside the main.jsx, this is just the entry point of the application. We are not changing anything inside here. So inside the app.jsx, we're going to need a few things. So let's go ahead and say import useState and use effect. Let's also go ahead and import some components which you don't yet have. So you import the header from /components/header, and then let's copy this down a few more times. What I've done there is just highlight this and then Control D to highlight the next one so that I can change both of them to say search because that is the next component that we need. And then the same one right here, we need the current weather. And then this one right here, we need the metrics. We also need the daily forecast. And then we need the hourly forecast. And then finally, we need our loading state. So loading state of the application. So remove that. And we also need some more imports. So we need to go ahead and import a function called fetch weather data. And fetch weather data is coming from ./lib/utils. Now, once again, we don't have this folder, we don't have this file, but we're going to create them. And then we need to go ahead and import the error image. So import error from this coming from /assets /images /icon error .svg, and this we have it inside our assets, inside our images, and it is called icon error .svg like that. And then we also need the retry image, so retry from /assets /images /icon retry .svg. And with that, we are ready to begin building out our state values, and probably should add in all these other components. So let me maximize this so that you can have a bit more screen to work with. And what I'm going to do is inside the source folder, I'm going to go ahead and create a new file called components. And then inside the new file, so I'm going to say components /header.jsx, which is going to create a folder called components, and then the file called header.jsx. And then I'm going to say rfc, which is going to create a React function component and export it for me. And the reason why I can do that is because of an extension that I have, which is called ES7 Plus React Redux and React Native Snippets. You can install it if you want. Now we need to go ahead and create the other components. So we need the search. So right inside components new file, search.jsx, and then rfc, enter, save. And then the next component we need is the current weather.jsx, and then rfc, enter, save. And then the next one is called metrics.jsx, rfc, enter, save. Next we have daily forecast, so daily forecast.jsx, rfc, enter, save. Next we have hourly forecast, so hourly forecast.jsx, rfc, enter, save. Next we have the loading state .jsx, then rfc, enter, save. And then next we have the that is all the components. Now let's just go ahead and create this file and folder as well. So once again, inside the source folder, create a new file called lib/utils.js. Now not JSX because it is just holding JavaScript functions. And then inside here, you can just say export const fetch weather data, and then make this an arrow function like so. Then you can leave it to be empty, just so that we don't break our application because of this right here. Now, these underlines that we're getting here is because we are defining these, but we have not used them anywhere. So let's just continue building out application, and that should get rid of these squiggly lines. So the first thing that we need to do is set up our state values. So const weather data, and set weather data is equal to useState, and by default it is going to be null because we are not getting back anything when the application is loading. Then const location and set location. This is going to be equal to useState, and by default it is going to be an object. The name that we're going to return is Berlin, Germany, and then the latitude is 52, and then the longitude is 13.405, and this is coming from the API as we saw, and not really coming from the API, but the default location here, the reason why I've selected Berlin is because this is what we have in the API demo. And then const units and set units. This is equal to useState. By default, we want to show the metric units, and then const loading and set loading. Use state. By default it is going to be false, and then const initial loading and set initial loading is equal to useState. By default it is going to be true. Now what is the difference between this one and this one? Initial loading is going to be for the entire application so that we can show some kind of state before the application loads in for the first time, and loading and set loading is simply going to be just for some UI tweaks in our application. And then next we need to get the selected day, so const selected day and set selected day. This is going to be equal to useState, and by default it is going to be 0 because arrays are 0 based. And then const search results and set search results. This is going to be equal to useState, and by default it is going to be an empty array. And then const show search results and set show search results. This is going to be equal to useState. By default it is going to be false. Now we're going to be creating a number of functions inside here, but I don't want to create them right away because some of them are quite long. So I just want to have the outline of them. So const handle search is one of the functions. This is going to be an asynchronous function, and we're going to leave it as empty. And this handle search is going to be taking the search term as an argument. So leave that to be empty like so. The next one is called handle location select. This is going to take in the location data, and let's just have it as empty so. And then next, const load weather data. This one is going to be an asynchronous function. It doesn't have any arguments. Leave it as empty. And then we're going to have our use effect. Inside this use effect, we're going to be calling the load weather data function, which is this one right here. And then the dependency array is going to be the location and the units. So anytime that the location changes, then we need to get the data about that particular location, or rather the other location that we've selected. And then when the units change from Fahrenheit to Celsius, for example, then we also need to load the weather data. Now, another function that we're going to need is called toggle units. And this is just basically going to be toggling between the metric and imperial units. And this is quite simple. So let's just go ahead and type it. So set units, we want to check for set units, or they want to set units. What am I saying? We want to set the set units function, and then we're going to check for units whether it is equal to metric. If that is true, then we want to change the units into the imperial units. Otherwise, we want to just set them to the metric units like so, and that is the entire function. Now finally, we want to check if initial loading is true, and if initial loading is true, then you want to go ahead and return the loading state just like that. Now the loading state is quite a big component, and I don't know whether it is going to make sense to build it out first. So I want to go ahead and build out the UI first of all, so that when we're building out the loading state, it is going to be easy to understand why we're building it out in that way. So for the app, what we're going to do is return a div, and this div is going to have a class name of min height dash spring, and then text dash white. Inside this div, we're going to return another div with a class name of container and mx auto, and then padding on the x of 4 and padding on the y of 6, and then max width dash 7xl. Inside this, we're going to return the header component, and the header component is going to be taking some props. So it's going to take in the units as the units, and then on toggle units function is going to be calling the toggle units function like so. And I said function for this, but this is prop. So the on toggle units prop is going to be taking the toggle units function. Below the header, we're going to turn another div with a class name of text-center and then margin bottom of 8. And then inside this div, we're going to turn an h1 with a class name of text-3xl, and then on medium screens, text-5xl and font-bold, and then margin bottom of 16, and then text-shadow. Now, text shadow is a class that we don't have. This is coming from our CSS, which we have also not yet written. But the h1 is now going to say, how's the sky looking today? Question mark. Below the h1, we're going to return a search component. The search component is going to take in the on search prop, which is going to be calling the handle search function. And then it is going to take in the loading, which is going to call loading. And then search results is going to call search results. And then show search results is going to take in show search results. Make sure that you spell them correctly. And then on location select is going to be calling the handle location select. And then on close results, this is going to be an inline function, so we can just write it out inside here. We're going to say set show search results into false, because remember that it is true by default. Now we're going to go below this div, and below this div we want to check if weather data is true. Now if it is true, we want to go ahead and return something, and then if it is false, we're also going to be returning something. So let's start with the true statement first of all. We're going to have a div here with a class name of grid, and then grid-columns-1, and then on large screens, grid-columns-3 with a gap of 6. Inside this div, we're going to return another div with a class name of large screens column span-2, and then space on the y of 6. And then inside this div, we're going to show the current weather component. The current weather component is going to take in the data as weather data, and then it is going to take in the location as the location that we're getting back. Below the current weather, we're going to return the metrics component. The metrics component is going to take in the data as weather data. It is going to take in the units as the units. And then I have it taking the loading as well, but I really doubt if we're going to be using the loading inside our metrics, but let's just have it in just in case, because I can't remember. And then daily forecast. Next, we are returning the daily forecast component. This takes in the data as weather data. It takes in the on day select. So when you select a day, we're going to call the set selected day. Set selected day. There we go. And then the selected day of data is going to call the selected date. And then we're going to now go below this component, and then below this div, we're going to return another div with the class name of large screens column dash span dash 1. And then inside this div, we're going to call the hourly forecast component. The hourly forecast takes in the data as weather data. It takes in the selected day as selected day, and then it takes in the on day change as set selected day, set selected day, just like that. And then now let's deal with our else statement. So for the else, we're going to return a div. This div is going to have a class name of flex, and then flex dash column, and then items dash center, and text dash center, and max width dash large, and then mx auto typing, and then space on the y. So space on the y of 4. Inside this div, we're going to turn an image component here, or an image element. The source for this image is going to be the error which we imported on the top. If you remember, where is it? Right here. And then the alt attribute for this image, since it is just a decorative image, we can have it as empty. And then the class name, we're going to give it a class name of block and mx auto, and then size dash 10. Now below this image, but still within the div, we're going to turn an h2 with a class name of text dash 4xl. Inside this h2, we're going to say something went wrong. And then below this h2, we're going to have a paragraph. This paragraph is going to have a class name of text gray dash 400. And then the text is going to say we couldn't connect to the server, and then in brackets API error. Please try again in a few moments. Now below this paragraph, we're going to have a button. This button is going to have an on click, which is going to be calling the what's it called, the fetch weather data function, fetch weather data. And then it's going to have a class name of flex and items dash center, and justify center, and then space on the x of 2. And then it's going to have a class name of glass dash card, which is also coming from our CSS. And then padding of the x of 4, padding of the y of 2, rounded dash large. And then on hover, we're going to say bg white with an opacity of 20, so /20. Then transition dash all with a duration of 200. Now I've just remembered that I have not mentioned something. I have another extension which is called Tailwind CSS IntelliSense, which is this one right here. So Tailwind CSS IntelliSense, this is the extension that is giving me these drop downs for Tailwind CSS. So if I hover over a class right here, it gives me more information about that class. And then if I don't remember a class name, for example, so for duration, I can type du and then control spacebar, and then it's going to give me the Tailwind CSS classes that have the du, the letters that I've typed in. So duration dash 200 is what I wanted. Now, inside this button, we're going to have an image element. This image, the source for this is going to be the retry, which we also imported. The alt attribute is going to be empty, once again, because it is a decorative image. The class name is going to say margin on the right of 2, and then size dash 4. And then the text is going to say retry, just like that. Now, let's see, we have some errors here because we have not yet used these state values anyway. So we can say that it is not going to break our application, but now if you take a look, you'll notice that we return the loading state. The reason why we return the loading state is because initial loading is true by default. And why is it true? Because we want that when we fetch our data somewhere, then we're going to set initial loading to false. But as you can see, we have just empty functions. Now, the bottom part that we've been building right here is part of the design. So API error state should be it. So this is what we're building out as the bottom part right here. So next, I think it is going to be very nice for us if we go ahead and write our CSS. So first of all, we want to get the root element. We're going to say font synthesis and set this into none. We're going to say text rendering, set this into optimize legibility, and then dash WebKit, what's it called? WebKit font smoothing, WebKit font smoothing. This is going to be set to anti-aliased, and then dash Moz OSX font smoothing. These are just vendor prefixes of grayscale, like so. And then we want to set the H1 and the H2 to have a font family of bricolage. That's it called, bricolage grotesque. Now, this font is available for us. If you check the assets and then the fonts, this is the font that we're using for the H1 and H2. Now, you can use the static font that we have inside here, but I want to use the one that we're getting from Google Fonts. And the reason is simple. I have forgotten the syntax for how to use this. Now, yes, I do realize that I can Google it, but I don't want to do that. Now, the fallback is going to be sans serif. The font weight is going to be 700. And then font optical sizing is going to be auto. And then font style is going to be normal. And then font variation settings, we're going to set this into width. So WDTH, it doesn't have an I, and then set it to 100 without a comma. So just take note of the syntax. And then we're going to go inside the body. The body, we're going to set the font family into DM sans. And then the fallback is going to be sans serif. Font weight is going to be 400. The font size is going to be 18 pixels, so 18 pixels, but it's going to take me to use EM. So what is 18 pixels in EM? 18 pixels in EM. That is 1.125. So 1.125 EM. And then what's next? The line height. The line height for the text is going to be 1.5, and then the background is going to be an HSL value of 243 and 96% and 9%. And once again, where am I getting this from? If you check the style guide, it is right here. Below the body, we want to have our button here to have all the cursor of pointer. So all the buttons are going to have a cursor of pointer. And then we're going to create our glass card style. Remember, we used this before in our app.jsx. So inside here, we want to set the background into RGBA and then 255, 255, 255, and then 0.1 to give it an opacity. So basically a white background with an opacity of 0.1. And then backdrop filter, we're going to set this into the blur and give it a blur radius of 10 pixels. And then the border is going to say 1 pixel solid, and then RGBA 255, 255, 255, and 0.1, just like that. And then the next class is called text shadow. Once again, we have used this somewhere, so now we are typing it out. So we're going to give it a text shadow of 0, 2 pixels, 4 pixels, and then RGBA 0, 0, 0, and 0.3. And then we're going to have another class here called weather-bg, and I'm going to explain this class when we get to it. But basically what it's going to be doing is adding a background image. So we're going to pass in background and then pass in URL. This comes from /assets /images /bg. Today we want small first of all. And then the background repeat is going to say no repeat. And then the background position is going to say center, and background size is going to say cover, just like so. And then I want to hide the scroll bar because the scroll bar looks ugly. And the way that I'm going to do that is going to say double colon and then dash WebKit dash scroll bar, just like that. And then I'm going to say display none, And then I'm going to add a media query here. So add media for a min width of 768 pixels. Then I'm going to say the weather BG right here. So just copy this class. We want to change this into large because that is the larger image. So once again, once we get to where we're going to use this class, then I'm going to explain it. But let's go ahead and save that. And then I think next, because all we're seeing now is still the loading state, and you can see that it has defaulted to sans serif because I've not imported that font. So let me just go ahead and grab it from my JavaScript right here, not JavaScript, but from my GitHub. And I think it should be inside the index HTML and the font that I want. So I want to copy these 3 links right here. So copy and then paste them inside my index HTML. So paste them below that. And then let's update the title to say Frontend Mentor Weather App, just like that. Save it, and then that should also update the text. As you can see right there, the font has updated. So let me take this back into the utils because we're going to need that in a moment. Shrink this down. So what we need to do next is we need to go ahead and start working with the API, because once we are able to get back some kind of data from the API, then we are not going to be able to see the loading state anymore. And like I said, I want to build this last so that you are going to understand why we're building it out the way we're building it out. So inside the lib, inside the utils, we're going to go ahead and begin to create our functions. So export const fetch weather data. This is going to be an asynchronous function, and it's going to take in the latitude, the longitude, and the units. And the units by default are going to be the metric units because we are normal people. And then inside this, we're going to say const the temp unit. So temperature unit is going to be checking for the units. If units is triple equal to metric, then we want to return Celsius. So how do you spell Celsius? Celsius. And then otherwise, we're going to return Fahrenheit. So Fahrenheit. And then const wind speed unit. This is going to be checking for the units. If the units is metric, if that is true, then the wind speed is kilometers per hour, otherwise it is miles per hour. And then const precipitation unit. This once again checks for the units. If the unit is metric, don't make that mistake, then I want to return millimeters. Otherwise, I want to go ahead, this is the question. Otherwise, I want to go ahead and return inches. So just like that. And then now I want to go ahead and copy the URL. Remember that huge URL that we had? I want to go ahead and copy it. So copy and then paste it here. Let's reduce this. Now you can go ahead and copy this from the GitHub repository, or you can go ahead and play around with the API to see what kind of data you're going to get. But as you can see, the gist of it is that we are getting quite a bit of data from the API. And then we are substituting the latitude with our latitude, which we're passing in as an argument, the same to the longitude. And then for the temperature unit, we are getting this one. So whether it is Celsius or Fahrenheit, depending on whether we have selected metric unit or the imperial unit. And then same to the wind speed, and then same to the precipitation unit. Now we're going to say this const response. Response is equal to await fetch. Not my typing. So await fetch and then pass in the URL. And then if there is no response, okay, then what I'm simply going to say is throw new error, and it's going to say failed to fetch weather data, just like that. And then we're going to go ahead and return the response.json so that we can get back some kind of data. Now with this, we should be able to save that, and then when we reload our application, we should be getting back something from the API. Fetch weather data. Let me check something. Oh, we have not yet built this. That's why. So let's go ahead and continue building out the rest of the functions that we need in our utils. So below this, we're going to create a function to format date. So export const format date. This date, not data. This is going to take in the date as follows. We're going to say const options is equal to weekday. So the weekday is going to be long. The year is going to be numeric. The month is going to be long. And then the day is going to be numeric. And then below this, we're simply going to go ahead and say return date dot to local date string, and then pass in English-US, and then pass in the options just like that. And then next, we need to go ahead and say, or rather, we need to get the name of the day. So export const get day name. This takes in the date string. And then we're going to say const date is equal to new date, and then pass in the date string. And then we're going to say return date. I've written data here, so date dot to local date string, pass in English-US, and then we're going to open this up, and then we're going to say weekday, set this into long, just like that. And then next, we need to create a function here called export const get temperature unit. This takes in the units as an argument. We're going to say return units, check if it is triple equal to metric. If it is true, then we want to return Celsius or degrees Celsius. Once again, I'm going to copy this from the API. So let me just get it. And the reason I'm copying it is because it has this degree symbol right here. So let me just copy this entire line. So post get temperature unit, paste it here. And then you know what? The wind speed and precipitation are also quite similar. So let's just copy them and then paste them here. We can remove the comments, but the comments are going to be available for you in the repository. And then the final function that we need to create is this function right here, which is called get weather description. And this is something that I found out. I didn't know that this is how weather is usually determined, but it has like some values here, and the values correspond to some kind of weather pattern, as you can see right there. So that is basically what this function is doing. So let's go ahead and copy that, and then you can paste it on the bottom. You can see it looks much better. What have I copied? Okay, I've not copied the entire thing. So paste it, there we go. So basically what we're saying is we want to get a type of weather description depending on the code. And the code here is either going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 45, 48, and so on and so forth. And then depending on the weather code that we're getting here, we're also going to be showing a kind of weather icon, which is going to be corresponding with the weather description that we're getting back on the right. And then we are simply returning the descriptions, which is basically this entire object, and then passing in the code, which we have as an argument. And if it exists, we're going to get an icon with a description. And if it does not exist, then we're simply going to return unknown, meaning it is an unknown kind of weather pattern. So with that, we can save that. And then now we can jump back into our app.jsx, and then we can continue building out the app.jsx so that we can get some kind of weather data. So I think now we can place this to the right and then place this to the left. So let's start with our handle search function. Inside handle search, we want to check if there is no search term. Search, give me the drop down, come on. So search term, if there is no search term.trim, then we want to go ahead and simply say return, so break out of it. And then otherwise we're going to say set loading into true, and then set show search results into false. And then we're going to have a try catch block, so try catch. Inside the catch, because it's easy, we're simply going to say console.error, and then we want to say error searching for location, and then pass in the error. And then we're also going to have a finally block here. We're going to say set loading into false so that we don't have an infinite loading. But for the try block, we're simply going to say const location data is equal to await fetch location data, which I've just realized is a function that I neither imported nor created. So fetch location data takes in the search term, which are getting back from the top, but the fetch location data is also coming from utils, so fetch location data. And then right below this, we're going to say set search results into the location data that we're getting back. And then we're going to say if location data.length is greater than 0, then we're going to say set show search results into true. So show a drop down of the search results, and that is the entire function to handle search results. And then we need to go ahead and create another function here called handle location select. So let's go ahead and open this up, and we're going to say const new location, create an object here where we're going to say that the name is going to be backticks and then $, curly brackets, location data, which is our argument right here, dot name, and then comma, and then $ curly bracket again, location data dot country, because that is how the names are represented. The latitude is going to be the location data dot latitude. It's called latitude. That's what we're getting back. And then the longitude is also going to say location data dot longitude, just like that. And then below this, we're going to say, below the new location object, we want to say set location into new location. So passing the new data that we're getting back from the API, and then set show search results, take this back into false, and then set search results to reset it into an empty string. So basically resetting everything. And then our const load weather data function is going to be as follows. We want to check if there is no weather data. If that is true, we're going to say set initial loading into true, and then else we're going to say set loading into true. So, and then below this we're going to have our try catch block. So once again, because it's easy, let's start with the console, with the catch block, where we're going to say console.error, and we're going to say error fetching weather data, and then pass in the error like so. And then for our finally block, we're going to say set loading into false, and then set initial loading back into false as well. And then for our try block, we're going to say const data is equal to, so const data is equal to await fetch weather data, and then pass in the location dot latitude. Remember, because this function takes in the latitude, the longitude, and the units as arguments. So when we are initializing it, we also need to pass in the arguments. So location.latitude, and then location.longitude, and then pass in the units as well. And where are the units coming from? They're coming from right here. So it is metric by default. And let's see, so pass that in, and then we're going to say set weather data into the data that we get back from right there. Now, why do we have this error? It's because of missing dependency. But if I add load weather data here, it is going to ask me to place this inside a callback. Do I want to do that? So let me just add load weather data, because now it's going to ask to put it inside the callback. So cut it out and then use callback, and then paste that in, and then add a dependency array here. So it needs the location, latitude, longitude, units, and weather data. So location, use that units and weather data so that I don't forget them, and then location dot latitude and location dot longitude. But I don't know whether this is going to be good, because it might cache the results and we might end up with a bug in our application. But let's just go ahead and test it out to see what we have. Let's save that and now reload it, and we should be getting back something on the screen. Let's check. Oh, we have not created this function. That's why we have the error. We have not created the function called location data. So let's go ahead and create it. So back inside the utils, we are simply going to go below this function, and we're going to say export const fetch location data. This is an asynchronous function, and it takes in the query. Now the query in this case is, for example, is going to be the search term, so that when you type a location, for example, Nairobi, then that is going to be the query that is passed inside the location data function right here. And for this one, I'm going to say const URL is equal to backticks HTTPS. This is coming from, in order to not make mistakes, let me just copy it, because it is very easy to make mistakes. So this one right here, let's copy this, place it here as the URL, move this back to the side. And so basically what we're saying is that we want to hit this API, and the query that we're passing in is going to be the argument for the location. And what we're saying, encode URI component, what this does is that if, for example, your name has spaces, so if you're searching for which name has location, like the Republic of the Congo, it has like a number of spaces. So what encode URI component does is that it is going to substitute those spaces with some entities. So for example, a space is going to be %20, so that when you're searching for it in the API, then you're going to get the correct data. So that's what this function does right here. Now, next one, say const response is equal to await fetch, and then we want to pass in the URL which we have right on top. If there is no response, or if no response not okay, then we're going to say throw new error, and then we're going to pass in failed fetch location data, and then below this we're going to say const data is equal to await response.json, and then we're going to say return data.results otherwise return an empty array, just like that. So let's save that, and then let's reload our application. So we have the loading state, and then our app loads in. You can see right there looking very nice. So this is the font that we have for the heading, and then this is the other font that we have for the rest of the text. So you can see we have quite a number of components to build out. So let's just go step by step. Let's jump into the header.jsx. So Control P and then just type in header and then enter, and it's going to throw you into this file, and you can begin to build out this component. So in the header, we're going to start by importing everything that we're going to need. So we're going to import use state from React. We are also going to import the images that we're going to need. So import logo from /assets/images/logo.svg. You can verify these files inside the images, and it is called logo.svg. So I'm not going to do that every single time, but I just want to show you that these are the images that we're targeting. And then let's copy this down a bunch more times because we need a few images. And for this second image, we're going to call this units icon. For the third image, we're going to call this drop down. And then for the fourth image, we're going to call this checkmark. So we don't need this fifth image. Now the logo is coming from logo.svg. The units icon is called icon-units.svg. And then the drop down is called icon-dropdown.svg. And then the checkmark is called icon-checkmark.svg. And then the header takes in some props, so it takes in the units, and it takes in the on toggle units. So that's how we are destructuring them, because remember that in the app.jsx, where we have the header, we are passing the units and then the on toggle units as well. Now below this, we want to set up our state value. So const is drop down open, and set is drop down open. This is equal to use state, not use transition, sorry, use state, and by default it is going to be false. Now we're going to return the header element. This is going to have a class name of flex, and then justify dash between, and then item dash center, and then margin bottom of 8. And then inside this header, we're going to have a div with a class name of flex and items dash center, and then space on the x of 2. So space on the x of 2. And then inside this, we're going to turn the image. The source for this is going to be the logo, and then the alt attribute is going to say weather now, and you're going to see why in a moment. And then the class name is going to say width-40, and then on small screens and above, we're going to say width-auto. You can close this down, and when you save it, you'll see that the image says weather now. So that's why the alt attribute is also saying weather now. I mean, it can say something else, but just for simplicity's sake. Now below this div, we're going to create another div with a class name of relative, and then inside this, we're going to have a button element. This button is going to have an on click. So when you click on this button, you want to open this up and say set is drop down open into the opposite of is drop down open, like so. And then we're going to give this a class name of flex and items dash center, and then space on the x of 2, and then glass card. Remember, we created that class in our CSS. And then padding on the x of 4, padding on the y of 2, and then rounded dash large, and then on hover bg white with an opacity of 20, and then transition dash all with a duration of 200, just like that. Close it out. Inside this button, we're going to have the image. The source is going to be the units icon, and then the alt attribute, this is decorative, so we can have it as empty. And then the class name is going to say inline dash block with a margin right of 2. Close it out. And then below this, the text is going to say units. And then now below the text that says units, we're going to have another image. The source for this image is going to be the drop down. The alt attribute, Once again, it is decorative, so it doesn't need to have an alt attribute. But the class name for this is going to be dynamic. So we're going to pass in our curly brackets and then backticks. So by default, it's going to have a class name of inline block and then margin on the left of 2 and then $ curly brackets. We want to check for is drop down open. If that is true, then we want it to have a class of rotate -180 and then transition. And then otherwise, we want it to have no classes, just like that. Now you can save that, and this is the part that we're building. So basically, the units icon is this one on the left, and then the drop-down icon is this one on the right. So when I click on this, you can see that the drop-down icon rotates. That's why we are having these dynamic class names right inside there. Now we actually need to go ahead and build the drop-down so that when you click on this, it gives you a drop-down. So what we're going to do is below this button, we want to check for is drop down open, and only when that is true, that's when we want to return the following. We are going to return a div here and close it out. And this div is going to have a class name of absolute. And remember that the parent div, which is this one in this case, has a class name of relative. So just take note of that. So we're going to say absolute and then right -0 and then margin on the top of 2 and width -48 and then glass -card and then rounded -large shadow -large and then z-index of 50 so that it is on top of everything and then text -sm and then inside this we're going to turn a div with a padding all around of 4 and then inside this another div with a class name flex and items as center and then justify as between and then margin bottom of 4. And then inside this, we're going to have a button. This button is going to have an on click. So when you click on this, open the inline things right here. We're going to call the on toggle units, on toggle units, which is the function that we have. So on toggle units. And then we're also going to say set is drop down open in false. So when you click on it, it is going to toggle the units. And then it's also going to set is drop down into false. And then this is going to have some class names here. So it's going to have a class name of text-white and then glass-card and then padding on around of 2, rounded _large, transition-colors and then width-full, just like so. Inside the button, we're going to say switch to, and then you want to check if the units is triple equal to metric is true, then we're going to say switch to imperial. Otherwise, we're going to say switch to metric. Now you can save that, and what we have on the screen is this one. So this button right here. So switch to imperial and switch to metric. Which class have I messed up? Padding. This should be padding on round of 2, not padding on the x of 2. That's it. Now below this button and below this div, we're going to have another div with a class name of space on the y of 4, and then we're going to have a div inside here, and then inside this div we're going to have another div with a class name of text-white and then text-sm and margin bottom of 2. And the text is going to say temperature, so temperature, so temperature. And then below this div, we're going to have another div with a class name of space on the y of 1. And then inside this div, we're going to have another div with some dynamic class names, so close it out. So this is going to have a class name here, which is dynamic. So backticks, curly brackets and then backticks. So flex, items as center, justify dash between, and then padding on the x of 3, padding on the y of 2, and then rounded, and then $ curly brackets. We want to check if units is triple equal to metric. If that is true, then we want bg white /20, and otherwise we want that when you hover over it, then bg white /10. And then finally we want to have transition dash colors at the end of it. Inside this div, we're going to have a span with a class name of text-white, and the text is going to say Celsius. So how do you spell it? Celsius. Wait, how do you spell Celsius? So it is S and S. Okay. Now Celsius here is going to have the degree symbol, and the way that you can add the degree symbol using HTML entities is &deg semicolon and then C. So degrees and then Celsius is the symbol for Celsius. And then now below this span, we want to check for units if units is triple equal to metric. If that is true, and only when that is true rather, Then we want to return an image here, close it out, and this image is going to have a source of checkmark, and then the alt attribute is going to be empty, and I know right now you know the reason why. And then the class name here is going to say inline block, and then margin on the right of 2. Now we can save that to see what we've been building, and it is right there. So the degree symbol is right there, and then Celsius. So that's what this is referring to. Now next, we are going to go ahead and copy this div. It is easier. So copy and then paste it down. And now we are checking if the units is equal to what's it called, imperial. And then right here, we're also checking if the units is equal to imperial. And what this is going to change is Fahrenheit, and then degrees F, so degrees Fahrenheit. So when you save that, it's going to add this second entry, as you can see right there. And then now we're going to copy this entire div. So starting from this div that doesn't have a class name, which you can shrink down right here so that you don't have to scroll all the way bottom. So copy and then paste it down. Now this second one is not checking for temperature, it is checking for wind speed. So wind speed, and this is checking for metric. But now the unit that we're searching for is called kmh. So let's remove all this. So kilometers per hour, so kmh. And then the units can remain to be the same. This is imperial. Now this is not Fahrenheit. This is now mph. Save that, and you can see that now it shows that. And you might be wondering why these are ticked. It is because we are currently on the metric units. That is the reason why. So if I were to change it into imperial units somewhere, which is app.jsx, you can see that by default it is metric. So if I change this into imperial, you'll notice that even this is going to change into the imperial units. Okay, so metric, and then let's go back to the bottom. We already copied this div, so we need to go where this ends. So paste it down one more time, and what this is now checking for is precipitation. So precipitation, and this is not checking for degrees Celsius. This is now checking for millimeters by default if it is metric, and then if it is imperial, then it is checking for inches. And you know what, I should type it inches and then in bracket in, so the unit, and then this one should also say how do you spell millimeters, and then in bracket so is that how you spell millimeters? I hope so. And then now when I say that, that is the entire header component complete. Very, very nice. So next, let's go ahead and deal with our search component. And I think, let me maximize these. Let me just maximize them. Or rather, you know what? I think it's going to be easier for demonstration if they're side by side. So let me just have them like so. So side by side, let's increase this up to there. So Control P and then type in search and then enter. It's going to throw you into this file. Now, inside the search, we want to import useState. And then we want to import the search icon from ./assets/images/icon-search.svg. And then the search takes in a number of props. So on search, and then loading, and then search results, and then show search results, and then on location select, and on close results. Now, where are these coming from? In the app.jsx, you can simply search or find where you have the search component, and these are all the props that we need. And then let's set up our state variable. So const search term and set search term. This is equal to useState. By default, it is going to be an empty string because we are assuming that you're not searching for anything by default. Now we're going to have some functions here. So const handle submit. This is going to be checking for the event of E, and we're going to say e.prevent default so that the form submission doesn't trigger a page reload. And then we're going to call on search, which is one of the props that we have inside here. So on search, and then we're going to pass in the search term. Simple as that. That is the entire handle submit function. And how does it work? Well, on search is a prop, and the prop that it is referring to is this one right here, which calls the handle search function. What does the handle search function do? It searches for, it shows you search results rather based on a search term that you give it. Where do we give this search term? Inside the search, when you call this function, we pass in the search term. Simple as that. The next function that we need is called handle input change. And handle input change, once again, checks for the event of e, where we're going to say the following: set search term into e.target.value, like so. And then we want to check if e.target.value is equal to an empty string, then we simply want to close the search results. So on close results, like so. What have I done? This should be closed, like so. So this should not be here. There we go. Now let's go ahead and build out our return. So we're going to return a div with a class name of relative, and then max width dash md, then mexporter, and then inside the search we're going to return a form. The form is going to have an odd submit event, which we're going to call the handle submit function, which I've just created above, and then it's going to have a class name of flex, and then flex dash column, and then on small screens flex dash row, and then give it a gap of 4, close it out. Inside this we're going to return a div with a class name of relative and flex dash 1, and then inside this we're going to return the image component with a class name, with a source of search icon, and then the alt attribute is going to be empty, and then give this a class name of absolute, and then left dash 3 and top dash 1/2, and then transform, and then minus translate on the y-axis by half so that it is properly centered, and then size dash 5 and text gray dash 400, give it as the index of 10. Now below this we're going to have the input element. The input is going to be a type of text, and then the value is going to say search term, and then on change. So when you type inside the input, you are checking for the event of e. We're going to say set search term into e.target.value, and then the placeholder is going to say search for a place ... and then we're going to set this into disable. So the disable state for this is going to be equal to the loading, and then finally give this a class name of width dash 4, and then padding on the left of 10, padding on the right of 4, padding on the y of 3, and then glass dash card, rounded dash large, text dash white, placeholder dash gray dash 300, and then on focus we want to have an outline dash none, and then on focus ring dash 2, and then on focus ring dash white transition dash all with a duration of 200, just like that. Now we can save that just to see what we have on the screen. So basically this is the icon, and then this is the placeholder text, as you can see. So when you focus on it, we have an outline, and that is basically what we're adding inside here. Now below the input, we want to check for loading. If loading is true, and only when it is true, then we want to return a div with the class name of absolute, and then right dash 3, and then top dash 1/2, then transform, and then minus translate on the y by half. So, and then inside this div we're going to have another div with the class name of animate dash spin dash and rounded dash 4, and then size dash 4, border on the bottom dash 2, and then border dash white, and that's basically just like a loading spinner. So when you type inside it and then you submit it, it shows, I don't know whether you saw it, but it shows you that kind of loading spinner. Now we're going to go below this div, but before the closing thing of the form, we're going to have a button here. The button is going to be a type of submit. The disabled state of the button is going to be dependent on whether loading is true or whether we don't have a search term, so not search term dot trim. And then the class name for the button is going to say padding on the x of 6, padding on the y of 3, bg dash blue dash 600, and then on hover bg blue dash 700. And then for the disabled state, we want bg gray dash 600. And then for the disabled state, once again, we don't want to show cursor, so cursor dash not dash allowed, like so. and then rounded dash large, font dash medium, and then transition dash all with a duration of 200. And then on focus, we want the outline dash none, and then on focus ring dash 2, and then on focus ring dash white. Now inside the button, we want to check for the loading. If loading is true, then we're going to say searching searching . Otherwise, we're going to say search, just like that. So you can save that, and this is our button right here, looking very, very nice. So if you don't have anything typed in, then this is the disable state for the button. So you can't click it because of this class right here. So on the disable state, cursor not allowed. So you can't click it. Now below the form, we want to be able to show a drop-down list of the places that match what you have typed in. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we're going to show a progress indicator, which is going to be something similar to what we've just done on top. So, let's just do it again. So on loading, only when loading is true, that's when you want to have a div with a class name of absolute, and then top dash full, and then left dash 0, and then right dash 0, margin top of 2, then glass dash card, rounded dash large, padding all round of 6, and then z index of 50 so that it appears on top of everything. Inside this div, we're going to have another div with a class of flex, items dash center, space on the x of 2, and then text gray dash 300. And then inside this div, we're going to have another div with a class of animate dash spin, and rounded dash full, and size dash 4, and then border on the bottom of 2, and then border dash white. And then below this div, remember that this is self-closing, it doesn't have any element inside, so just take note of that. So we're going to go below this div, give it a span with the class name of text dash sm, and then the text is going to say search in progress. So you can save that. And what have we built? So if you search inside this, basically that drop down that you have. So now we're going to go below this loading, and then now we want to go ahead and show the search results. So we want to check for show search results, and search results dot length is greater than 0, 0, and when both of those are true, that's when you want to have the following. We're going to create a div, the class name of absolute, and top dash full, and then left dash 0, and then right dash 0, and then margin at the top of 2, and then glass dash card, rounded dash large, shadow dash large, and then z index of 50, and then max height dash what did I give it, 60, and then overflow dash y dash auto. So max height of 50 is going to ensure that it doesn't take up the entire screen, so it's going to limit it to like 60. What is 60 in Tailwind? So about 240 pixels. So when the search results are more than 240 pixels, then you're going to be able to scroll it because of overflow y auto. So the scroll bar is going to be automatic, even though remember that we have disabled the scroll bar. So it's not going to be visible, but you're going to have a visual cue that this thing is scrollable, because you're going to see that some words have been cut out. So inside here, we want to search for, we want to get search results.map. And then for every result that you get back, we also want to get back the index of the result. And then we're going to return the button here with the key of index. And then when you click on this, we're going to pass in our inline function, and then pass in on location select, and then pass in the result singular. And then this is going to have a class name of width dash full, text dash left, and then padding on the x of 4, padding on the y of 3, and then on hover bg dash white with an opacity of 10, and then transition dash colors, and then border dash bottom, and then border dash white with an opacity of 10. And then on the last item, we don't want to have a border, so border dash bottom dash 0. So that is just how you can check for the last item in Tailwind CSS. Inside this button, we're going to have a div with a class of text dash white, and then font dash medium. The text is going to say result.name. And then below this div, we're going to have another div with a class of text gray dash 300, then text dash sm. Inside this, we want to go ahead and say result.admin1, and then double ampersand, open up your backticks, and then $ curly brackets, result.admin1, and then have a space here. And then below this, we're going to say result.country. And it is at this point that I realized that I didn't really go through the API, so these might be new things. But basically, what we're saying, if I search for a place like Nairobi, then it shows me the search and then it gives me the drop down right here. So the result.name is this big title, and then result admin1 is this part right here. Probably let's have a comma, and the comma should be here, that it separates it out. So result admin1 is this part, and then the country is also going to be this part. So we are checking basically if admin1 exists, and then only when it exists, that's when you want to show this. You give it a comma and then show the country where that particular location is located. Okay, fantastic. So we have our search working. So I can click on this. It is going to update the current weather, and that is the component that we need to deal with next. So we have an error here, handle it change. We're not using this function anywhere, so I created it for nothing. Well, that's annoying. Wait a minute. You know what? We should be using it here. I think we should be using it here. Handle input change. I think that's how we use it. Is it? That's how you use it? No. We use it like this. E and then handle input change and then pass in e.target.value. Is that it? Save it. Search for Nairobi again. Can I search for another country? So Tonga? No, I cannot, because this is annoying. So let's undo again. Let's take it back to this. Let's disable this and then disable this. Save it. Nairobi is now working. If we search for Tonga, it is also working, as you can see right there. So let's go ahead and jump into our current weather.jsx. Inside here, we're going to be importing a component called weather icon from /weather icon, which we have not yet created. And then we also want to go ahead and import the format date function from ./libutils, which we created. Now, sometimes Visual Studio Code is going to give you like drop downs, and then you can select the one that you want. Sometimes it doesn't do that. So what you can do if it doesn't is control spacebar, and then it forces it to give you the drop down, and then you can just select it. Now, current weather takes in the data and then the location as props. And then below this, we want to check for if there is no data, then return null, just like that. And then we're going to create some two values here. So const current temperature is equal to math.round, and then passing the data dot current dot temperature underscore 2m, and then const weather code is equal to data dot current dot weather underscore code, just like that. And then you can build out our return. So we're going to return a div here with a class name of bg, sorry, not bg, but weather -bg, which is a class that we have in our CSS, rounded -2xl, padding on the x of 6, padding on the y of 24, relative, and then overflow -hidden. And then inside this, we're going to return another div with a class name of flex, and then flex-column, and then on small screens and above, flex-row, and then items center, and justify -between, and then relative, and then z-index of 10, just like that. Inside this, we're going to turn a div with a class name of margin bottom of 4, and then inside this, we're going to have a paragraph with a class name of text-2xl, and font-bold, and then text-white, and then margin bottom of 2, and this is going to be saying the location.name. And then below this paragraph, we're going to have another paragraph with a class name of text-blue-100, and then text-base, and then this is going to take in the format date, which will be imported on top, and then we're going to pass in the new date that it shows us the full name and date. So weather icon, okay, I saved it, but we don't have this component yet. So let's create it inside components, create a new file called weather icon.jsx, and then just say rfc, enter, save, so that you don't have that problem anymore. So let me just select a country here so that we can see that this is what we're building. Now, where is this coming from? Because these styles don't match up with what we're seeing on screen. Basically, what we're saying is that when we add the weather bg class name, we are adding a background image, which is coming from this URL right here, which we have in our assets and then images folder. So BG today large and BG today small. We are not repeating the background, we are centering it, and then background position is or the background size is set to cover. And then when we get on larger screens, so 768 pixels and above, then we want to show the larger image, which is this one. Now it doesn't have much of a difference, but look at how it toggles right around here. So this is the small image, and then right around here is the larger image. So that's basically why we have the weather.bg right here. So if I remove it, then we're not going to be able to see anything. Now below this div, we're going to run another div with the class name of flex and item just center, and then space on the x of 4. And then inside this, we're going to return the weather icon component, weather icon, which is going to take in the code as weather code, and then the size in this case is going to be large. And then inside this, we're going to turn a div with the class name of margin on the left of 8, and then text-8xl, and then font-bold, text-white, and then text-shadow, and then italic to italicize it. And then this is going to pass in, or is going to be showing the current temperature, and then ampersand deg semicolon to show the current temperature degrees. So just like that. Now look at this. We can already see that we're getting back some kind of data. So if I search for another place, so let's search for Tokyo, then you can search for Tokyo, Japan. It's going to load in the place called Tokyo, Japan. It's going to show the current date and then shows the weather. Actually, is that correct? Did I just happen to get two places with the same weather? Let's search for Nairobi. I know this one should be different. Okay. So let me reload that. Okay. So my internet is down. Okay. Well, that's not good. But as you can see right here, we created this loading state, or rather not the loading state, but the error state. So if you have an issue with the internet, then you can see that we have our retry button here, but the retry is not going to work in this case because I don't have internet. So I'm going to have to pause it there and then continue tomorrow. And so with the power of editing, you're not even going to be able to tell the difference.
The next day.
Okay, so it is the next day and I've verified that my internet is working. So now let's go ahead and search for a place so that you can see its weather. So it is searching and then gives me the drop down. And then you can see right here that it updates the weather and everything. And if we maximize it, and it's still searching, is it broken? The search seems broken. It's probably because of one of our state values somewhere. Well, that's annoying. Let me check this. Check the console. So there's nothing going wrong with the console. But if we go into the search.jsx, I think it's probably because of this that we disabled. So if we take a look at our search.jsx, we realize that the reason why we have this infinitely loading is because we are checking for the loading state right here. So loading and then search in progress. So the loading state is never being turned off. So if we check the app.jsx, we know that the loading state is being passed in somewhere. So set loading is set here. So handle search set loading to true, and then set loading is set to false here. But then in the, let's do a bit of debugging. So search loading. Everything should be okay. I mean, I don't know what's wrong. Let's shut this down. Let's clear the terminal. Let's break that. And then let's restart it. So npm dev. Let's shift F5 to reload the cache. And it's still doing the same thing. Let me check this. Inside the search. Loading is set to true. So if I want to change this to false, then it is set to false, as you can see. And then it goes back to true. So something is not working. And by the way, this extension that I have right here is called React DevTools, and it gives you access to the components and the profiler. So I'm currently in the components, so I'm just in the search component, and then I'm toggling this to check what the problem is. So something is wrong with our search. That's annoying. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's disable this, save that so that we can continue building up the application, and then we're going to handle our search later. because I don't understand why it's not working now, even though yesterday it was working, right? Now, the next component that we're going to build is the weather icon. And don't worry about these errors. All of these are because we have just disabled the search. So let's jump into the weather icon. So Control P and then just search for weather icon and enter. And it's going to throw you into this component. And the weather icon is going to take in some props. So it's going to take in the code, so the weather code, and then the size of the icon. And by default, we're going to set this into medium. And then the way that we're going to build this out is we're going to return an image. So this image is going to have a source of source, and then an alt attribute of alt, and then a class name here of some dynamic values. So $ curly bracket, and we're going to pass in the size classes, and then inside square brackets, we're going to pass in the size which we are destructuring right here. And then by default, it's going to have a class name of block and mx auto. And then we're going to add an attribute here called loading and then set it equal to lazy so that it lazy loads the images so that you don't have to load all of them at once. And now you're wondering where these are coming from. Well, we are going to create them right away. So right inside our component, we're going to say const and then destructure the source and then the alt. And this we're going to be destructuring them from the weather icon map, which we have not created, but this is going to take in the code. And if there is no code, then we want to go ahead and show the default icon. Now, where is the default icon and the weather icon map coming from? Well, we are going to create them. So I'm going to go about this, and then I'm going to go ahead and say this, that const default icon is going to be equal to, and then open up an object here. I'm going to set the source into overcast, and then the alt attribute is going to say unknown weather. So what this means is that if there is some kind of weather that we're getting back that doesn't exist, then we want to show the default icon right here. And where is the overcast coming from? Well, this is an icon which we have inside our assets, which we are going to import on the top. So we're going to go ahead and say import overcast from /assets /images / and it is called icon -overcast dot. It should be a WebP image. Let's just confirm. So icon overcast.webp. Okay. Now we are going to import a bunch of other images, but for now I want to go ahead and fix this and then fix this as well. So let's start with the size classes because it is much easier, and we're going to go right before the default icon. We're going to go ahead and define an object here called size classes. Size classes is equal to an object, and by default the small one is going to have classes of size -10, and then the medium is going to have class name of size -16, and then the large is going to have size -24. And just like that, we have defined the size classes. Now next we need to define the weather icon map. Now this is something that we have done already, but now what we just want to do is that we want to map the weather icon with the correct image that we have. Now where have we done this? Well, in the libutils, we created this on the bottom. So get weather description, where we were matching a code with a certain weather description. Well, we want to do something similar, but now in this case, we want to match the weather code with a certain image and then an alt attribute so that it can have access to this source and then the alt. So how do we do that? We're going to say const weather icon map is equal to, and this is also an object, where we're going to say that for the icon of 0, open this up as an object, then the source for this is going to be an image called sunny, which we have not yet imported, and then the alt attribute is going to say clear sky. Now if I were to go ahead and import this image, so copy this down and then highlight that, change this into sunny because I know that the icon is called icon sunny, then you can see that already now we don't have any more errors inside this component. We can remove the default import of React on the top. But now what we need to do is we need to go ahead and define all of these other values and then link them to certain images so that when you get back a code from the API, it is going to link it to the image and then the alt attribute so that we can destructure the source from here and the alt attribute from here as well, and then display them inside our image. And so because that involves quite a bit of typing, I've made sure that I've explained everything that is going on inside this component so that we can just go ahead and copy paste it because it involves quite a bit of typing. So if we go into the components right here And then inside components, we have the weather icon.jsx. We are simply going to import all of these images. So the imports that we have inside this component are all images. As you can see, they are all coming from our assets folder. And then we have the size classes. And then now we want the weather icon map. You can see, actually, let me just copy it so that we can preview it in a bigger font. So let me paste it here. You can see that for the code of 0, we are returning the sunny image rather, and then the alt is right there. For the code of 1, we're returning this. For the code of 2, this, and 3, and so on and so forth. And all of this is similar, or rather almost similar to what we have in our utils. And then we have a default icon. So in case we are returning a code that doesn't exist inside here, then we want to have a default icon, and this is also going to act like a fallback. So that, for example, if you're not getting back any data from the API, then your application doesn't break. Instead, it is going to show the default icon. And in this case, the default icon, I've set it equal to the overcast image, and then we return our image. Now you can go ahead and save that. And then what will happen in the API, as you can see right here, is that it returns this sunny image right there. So you can preview it, as you can see right there. And so that is our weather icon, and we're going to use that component elsewhere as well. But for now, I think we can begin to work on the metrics. So once again, Control P, type in metrics, and then let's just right click on this next file right here, and then say close to the right. Actually, what am I doing? Right click on this and then say close. Where is it? Close others. That should be okay. Now inside metrics, we're going to go ahead and import the get temperature. Give me the drop down temperature unit. It's not giving me the drop down, and then get wind speed unit, and then get precipitation unit. And remember that these are all functions that we created from our lib folder, so lib utils, that's where we are getting them from. And then the metrics component here takes in the data, the units, and the loading state as well. And then inside here we can begin to create our metrics. So const metrics is equal to, this is going to be an array of objects. So the object is going to have a label here of feels like, and then the value for this, we're going to open up our backticks and then $ curly brackets. We're going to say math.round, and then passing the data.current.apparent underscore temperature, like so. And then below this, we're going to have the unit. So we want to convert the units, so get temperature unit, and then pass in the units so that it can convert the units between Celsius and Fahrenheit. And then let me go ahead and copy this, copy, and then 1, 2, 3, because I know that we're going to need 4. This second one is going to say humidity. And then now we are not going to have math.round, but instead we're going to say data.current.relative underscore humidity underscore 2m. And then at the end of this, we're going to have the percentage symbol. And then for this one, we are not going to have a unit. So the unit is just going to be empty like so. And then next, we want to get the wind. And once again, we are going to have math.round and then data.current. This should say wind underscore speed underscore 10 meters, like so. And then this is going to say get wind speed units, and then pass in the units. And then finally, for the fourth one, we're going to have the precipitation. This is not going to have math.round, but instead it's going to say data.current.precipitation. And then this is going to say get precipitation units, and then pass in the units just like that. Now below this, we want to check if there is no data. So if there's no data, then we want to go ahead and show some kind of loading state. So we're going to go ahead and say return, and we're going to return a div here, and this div is going to have a class name. So class name is equal to grid, then grid dash column dash 1, and then on large screens grid column dash 4, and then give it a gap of 4. Inside this div, we're going to map over our metrics, which we've just created on top. So metrics.map, and then for every metric that we get back, then we want to get back the index as well. We're going to open this up and then return a div with a key of index, close it out. And then this div is going to have a class name here of glass-card, and then rounded-xl, padding all round of 4. And then on hover, we're going to say bg-white with an opacity of 20, and then transition-all with a duration of 200. And then inside this div, we're going to have another div with a class name of text gray-300, and then text-sm and margin bottom of 1. And then this div is now going to say metric.label. And then below this div, we're going to have another div with a class name of text-white, and then this is just going to say double underscore. So underscore underscore. So in case the matrix, or in case the data has not loaded, then you want to show the label of the metric and then just show a double underscore like so. Now we can save that and let's see what we have on the screen. Let's first reload it. So metrics. Oh wait, this is not working. Is this working? Okay, so the application is not reloading. Metrics. Okay, so seems to be an issue with caching, right? Let's shut that down. So clear the terminal. Let's remove the node modules, so node underscore modules, and then remove the pnpm-lock YAML file. Let's remove that, and then let's reinstall everything. So pnpm install, and oh, okay, I just realized that this was completely unnecessary because it was returning this. I was expecting to see this, but it was returning this, so it means that the data is loading. Okay, so that's my mistake. So let's just continue building it out as it is installing the node modules again. So for the metrics, we're going to go ahead and do this. We're going to return a div here with a class name. The class name is going to say grid, and then grid columns -2, and then on large screens grid columns -4. So grid columns -4, then give it a gap of 4 around. Inside this, we're going to say metrics.map, and then for every metric that we get back, then we're also going to get the index here. We're going to open this up, and then because it's easier, let's copy this div right here. We just copy this div because the class names are similar. And oh, this is not a semicolon, this is a full colon. I'm glad I saw that. So copy this and then paste it here. Close out the div, and then inside this div, we're going to return another div with the class name of text gray-300, and then text-sm, and then margin bottom of 1, and then this is going to say the metric.label. And then below this, we're going to have another div with the class name of text-2xl, then font-bold, and then text-white. Inside this, we're going to go ahead and show metric.value, and then we want to check whether metric.unit is true, so whether it exists or not. And only when it exists, that's when we want to have a span here. This span is going to have a class name of text-large, and then text gray-300, and then margin on the left of 1. And then the span is going to say metric.unit, just like that. So we can go ahead and save that. And now we should restart our server actually. Oh, this has not finished installing. Okay, let's wait a bit. Okay, so this has finished, and the reason why it was failing is because I had connected to a VPN. So just disconnecting and then running the command again installs it quite quickly. And then now let's say pnpm dev to restart our dev server right there, and then reload that. And there we go. So this is the metrics that we were building out. So looking very, very nice. And then I've just realized that we did not test out whether the imperial units toggle was working. So you can just click this drop down and then switch to imperial, and then it's going to switch to imperial, as you can see right there. Fantastic. Now let's go back to the actual beta units, and then let's now begin to build out the daily forecast. So Control P, search for daily forecast, and then let's jump into this file. So the first thing that we need to do is import the weather icon, which we have just created. So import weather icon from /weather icon, and then import get day name, which is a function that we created in our utilities. And then the daily forecast takes in a couple of props. So it takes in the data on day select, and then selected day. And I've just remembered something. We don't need this here. We don't need that prop, which means that in the app.jsx, I don't know whether I included it. I think I omitted it. Okay, so I included it, so we don't need it. We can remove it right there. Save that. So back inside daily forecast, what we are going to do is we're going to create a variable here called daily data. So const daily data is equal to data.daily, which we are getting back from the API. Remember, because this is something that is being passed in from right here. So from the weather data, and we know that weather data is being populated somewhere on the top right here. So data.daily. So if there is no data, then we want to have some kind of loading. So we're going to return a div here. This div is going to have a class name of rounded-xl. Close it out, and then an h3 that says text-xl, and then font-semibold, and margin bottom of 4, and then text-white, and then the text is going to say daily forecast, just like that. Below the h3, we're going to have a div with a class name of grid, and then grid-columns-2, and then on small screens, grid-columns-3, and then on large screens, grid-columns-4. 7 and then give all of them a grid gap of 3. And then inside here we're going to say daily data dot time dot slice and get the first 7 of them because it is a daily forecast and we have 7 days in a week. And then dot map, so map over all of them. And then because we are not interested in getting any object back because this is just basically the loading state, we can return an underscore, and then we want to get back the index, which is going to act as our unique key, and then open this up, and then we're going to turn a button with the key of the index, and then a class name here of glass-card, and then rounded-large, padding on the x of 4, padding on the y of 20, text-center, and then on hover, pg-white with an opacity of 20, transition-all with a duration of 200. And that is basically our loading state if there is no data. Now, if there is data, so for our actual return, let's go ahead and return a div here with the class name of rounded-xl. And then inside this div, we're going to turn an h3, which is basically the same as this one on top. So copy and then paste it here. And then below the h3, we're going to turn this div. So let's go ahead and copy this div, copy, paste it here. And then inside this div, we're now going to say daily data dot time dot slice. Once again, get the first 7 of them, and then dot map. And then now we are interested in getting back the object. So we're going to call the object date and then get back the index once again, which is going to act as our unique key. And then now we are not returning an implicit return. Instead, I'm going to open up curly brackets because I want to go ahead and create some values here. So const is selected is equal to check for the selected day and then check whether it is equal to the index of the day that we click on. And then const day name is equal to get day name, which is our utility, and then pass in the date and then the index, and then const max temp, which we're going to be displaying somewhere, and this is going to be equal to math.round, and then pass in daily data dot temperature underscore 2m underscore max, and then pass in the index, and then const min temp is equal to math.round, pass in daily data dot temperature 2m, and this should be min, and then pass in the index like so, and then const weather code is equal to daily data dot weather underscore code, and then pass in the index like so. And then now we can have our actual return. So we're going to return a button with the key of index, and then an on click on this button, which is going to be an inline function calling the on day select, and then pass in the index like so. And then the class names for this button are going to be dynamic, so curly bracket and then backticks is going to have glass-card and then rounded-large, padding around of 4, text-center, and then on hover, pg-white with an opacity of 20, transition-all, the duration of 200, and then $ curly brackets for our dynamic values. We want to check if is selected is true, and if that is true, then we're going to have bg white with an opacity of 20, and then ring-2, and then ring-blue-400, and then otherwise, if is selected is not true, then we just want to return empty classes like so. We can close out the button, and then now inside the button, we're going to have a div with a class name of text-sm, so text-sm, and then text gray-300, and then margin bottom of 2. And then the text here is going to say day name, which we are getting from the top right there. Below this div, we're going to have another div with a class name of margin bottom of 3. And then this div is going to be showing the weather icon component. The weather icon, remember, takes in a prop called code, and we're going to pass in the weather code for this, which once again we're getting from here. So the weather code, and then the size that we're going to pass in by default is medium, because remember that the weather code takes in is a prop called size. And then now below this div, we're going to have another div with a class name of flex and items-center, and then justify-between. And then inside this div, we're going to have another div with a class name of text-white, and then font-semi-bold, and then text-sm. And then this is now going to show the max temp. And then outside of this, ampersand degree DEG, and then semicolon. And then we're going to go below this div. We're going to have another div with a class name of text-sm, and this is now going to show the min temp, and then outside of this, ampersand DEG for the degree symbol. Now we can save that and look at what we have on the screen. So this is the max temperature, this is the mean temperature, this is the weather icon, and then this is the day name. Very nice. So that is the daily forecast. So you can see that on Tuesday we have a max temperature of 6 and a minimum temperature of 1, and so on and so forth. And then you can click on this. So is selected right here. Is selected is what is toggling these classes. So you can see that when I select another day, then it applies this kind of outline to it. That is just for user experience. And then now finally we need to go ahead and build our hourly forecast. So once again, we can close this down and then Control P, search for hourly forecast, and then enter, and we can begin to build it out. So hourly forecast is going to be as follows. We're going to import the use state from React. We're going to import weather icon from /weather icon. We are going to import the get day name, not giving me the drop down. This is coming from /lib/utils. And then we're going to import the drop-down image from /assets/images/icon-drop-down.svg, like so. And then we know that hourly forecast takes in the data prop, it takes in the selected day, it takes in the on-day change. And then once we have that, then we can begin to set up our state values. So const is drop-down open, and set is drop down open. This is going to be equal to use state. By default it is going to be false, and then const hourly data is going to be data.hourly. So once again, getting the data from the API and then setting it equal to the hourly, and then const daily data is going to say data.daily, just like so. And then next we need to go ahead and get the daily data for the selected day. So we're going to say const start hour is going to say selected day times 24, and then const end hour is going to say start hour plus 24, and then const selected day hours is going to say hourly data dot time dot slice, and we want to go ahead and slice the start hour. So that is going to be our first value, and then the end hour is going to be our second value, and then dot map, and then get back the time and the index, and then open this up like so, where we're going to say const hour is equal to new date, pass in the time, and then dot get hours like so, which is a function on new date, and then const temperature is going to say math dot round, and then pass in the hourly data dot temperature underscore 2m. I say it like that just to spell it correctly, and then the start hour, and then plus the index, like so. That's how you get the temperature. And then const weather code is equal to hourly data dot weather underscore, and then pass in the start hour plus the index. And then we want to go ahead and return, check if the hour is equal to 0. If that is true, then we're going to say 12. Otherwise, we want to check if hour is greater than 12. If that is true, then we want to return hour minus 12. And otherwise, we want to return just the hour like so. And then outside of this, we're going to return $ curly bracket once again. And we want to check if hour is less than 12. If that is true, then we want to return AM. And otherwise we want to return PM. And then we're also going to return the temperature, and then we're going to return the weather code like so. And then below this, we're going to say const selected day name is equal to get day name, and then pass in the daily data dot time, and then open this up. We're going to pass in the selected day. Then outside of this, we're going to pass in the selected day, just like so. Fantastic. Now our return is going to be as follows. We're going to return a div, the class name of glass-card, and then rounded-xl, padding around of 6, and then height-fit. And then inside here, we're going to return another div with the class name of flex, and items-center, and then justify-between with a margin bottom of 4. Inside this, we're going to turn an h3 with the class name of text-xl, and then font-semi-bold, and then text-white. And then the text is going to say hourly forecast, just like that. You can save that to see what you have on the screen right there. I think it's okay because we are now dealing with this component, so we can just have this maximized. Now below the h3, we're going to return a div with the class name of relative. Inside this div, we're going to return a button. This button is going to have an on click, and this on click is going to be an inline function. We're going to say set is drop down open to the opposite of is drop down open, so basically creating a toggle. And then the class name for this is going to say flex and item center, and then space in the x of 2, and then glass dash card, padding on the y of padding on the x of 3, padding on the y of 2, rounded dash large, and then on hover we're going to say bg white with an opacity of 20, transition dash all with a duration of 300, just like that. Inside this button we're going to have a span with a class name of text dash white, and this span is going to say the selected day name, so that when you select a day from the bottom, then it's also going to update here. Now below this span we're going to have an image. This image is going to have a source of drop down, so basically the drop down image, and then because it is a decorative image, we don't need to have anything inside the alt attribute. We can save that, and this is what we have right there. So if I click on another day, you can see that it also updates the selected day name. Fantastic. Now we're going to go below the button. We want to check if is drop down open is true, and only when it is true, that's when we want to go ahead and return a div here with a class name of absolute, and then right dash 0, and then spell it correctly, margin top of 2, and then width of 32, and then glass dash card, and then rounded dash large, and then shadow dash large, and then give it as the index of 50 so that it appears on top of everything. Close out this div, and then inside this div we're going to have another div with a class name of padding on the y of 2. Inside this we're going to say daily data dot time dot slice, and now we want to slice the first 7, so 0,7, because once again there are 7 days in a week, and since it is a drop down, we want to show Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then dot map, and then open this up, get back the date and then the index, and then we're going to have our implicit return where we're going to return a button with a key of index, and then the on click for this button is going to be an inline function like so, where we're going to open it up and say on date change, which is a function that we have in our props, and then pass in the index, and then we're going to say set is drop down open back to false so that it closes the drop down. Now the class names for this button are going to be dynamic, so width dash full, and then text dash left, padding on the x of 4, padding on the y of 2, and then on hover bg dash white /10, and then transition dash colors, and then $ curly bracket. We want to check for the selected day. If that is triple equal to the index, then we want bg dash white with an opacity of 20, and then otherwise we don't want to have any class names. Let's close this out. Now inside this button we're going to have a div with a class name of text dash white, and then text dash sm, and then this is just going to get day name, and then pass in the date, comma, index, like so. So you can save that, and now when you click on this we're going to have a drop down. Fantastic. So I can click on one of them and it is going to update, and then it also updates the selected day right here because the state values are linked. And then let's see, so Saturday is going to update into that, and so on and so forth. So now we actually need to have the drop down. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to go below these divs, and then below this, and then below 1, 2 div, and inside here we're going to have another div with a class name of space. Scroll down, so space on the y of 3, then max height dash 96, and then overflow dash y photo, and then inside here you want to check for loading, and if loading is true, and oops, do we have this? We don't have this anywhere, so we need to destructure it here as a prop, which means that in the app.tsx I probably did not have it. Yes, so loading is equal to loading, just like that. Save that. Fantastic. Let's continue. So if loading is true, we want to have something, and if it is not true, then we're also going to return something. So in the case of the true statement, we want to go ahead and say array, so create an array from, and then open this up, and then curly brackets, we're going to create an array of 8 items, and then dot map, and then since we're not interested in the first value, you can just return an underscore, but you need the index because that is going to act as a unique key. and then we're going to turn a div with a key of index, and then a class name of flex and items dash center and justify dash between, and then padding on the y of 2 and padding on the x. Padding all round of 2, and then animate dash pulse like so. Close it out, and then inside this div we're going to have another div with a class name of flex and the items dash center and then space on the x of 3. Inside this, even another div with a class name of size dash 6 and then glass dash card and rounded, and then this is a self-closing div. So once again, below that, another div with a class name of height dash 4 and then width dash 12 and then glass dash card and rounded. Again, it is self-closing, take note of that. And then we're going to go below this div. We're going to have another div with a class name of height dash 4 and width dash 8 and then glass dash card and then rounded. So this is basically just a loading state. This is all a loading state, and you can save that. Actually, can we preview it? You can preview it if we negate this, so not loading, and then that is our preview with classes not working. Space on the x. Did I not type that out? There we go. So that is our preview for our loading state. And then if I remove the negation, then we cannot see it, but now we can begin to build out the actual thing that we want to see on the screen. So right here, we want to go ahead and say selected day hours dot map, and then for every hour and the index, we're going to go ahead and return a div with the key of index and close it out. This div is going to have class name here of glass dash card and then flex and the items dash center and then justify dash between, and then padding on the y of 2, and then on hover we're going to say bg white slash 10 and then rounded dash large, padding on the x of 2, transition dash all with a duration of 200. Probably remove this class from here and then just rename this into padding all round of 2. And then inside this div we're going to have another div with the class name of flex and the items dash center and then space on the x of 3, so space x dash 3. Inside this we're going to show the weather icon. The weather icon takes in the code, and this code is going to say hour.weather code like so. The size is going to say small, and then close it out. And then below the weather icon we're going to have a span with the class name of text dash white and font dash medium, and then the text is going to say hour at time. And then below the span and below the div we're going to have another span with the class name of text dash white and font dash semi bold like so. This is going to show the hour dot temperature, and then ampersand deg to show the degree symbol. So deg and then semicolon to show the degree symbol right there. So at 12 a.m. it is that true? Is that true? It's showing me the sun icon here at 12 a.m. I mean, where I come from, 12 a.m. is completely dark. So let's actually now deal with our search icon so that we can search for other places to see whether we're getting back the correct data. So back inside our app.jsx, we can enable this search right here and save it. Is it still misbehaving? Okay, it's not. So let's search for Nairobi. Searching, and then I can select this one. It shows me the wrong data. It is showing me the wrong data because I for sure know that it is not 1 degree right now because I am in Nairobi. So it's not showing the correct thing. There's nothing in our console. Let's inspect this. Check the console. Error fetching weather data. So fetch weather data is not working. Too many requests. Okay, so too many requests. Where is our use effect? Or use effect? I think it's because of the use callback. I said it somewhere in the video, and I really think it's because of the use callback. Let's just go and remove it. Let's just remove this. Then at the top, let's remove the use callback. Now we're going to have this yellow thing because of ESLint, but let's save that. So something went wrong. We try, reload. Okay, so too many requests, so I think we have to wait for some time. Rather, I have to wait for some time because I don't know whether you're going to have the same issue, by the way, but that is quite annoying. Can I still search Nairobi? I can still search, but it's not going to show me anything. So I think once it resets, then this should be working correctly. But as I'm waiting for it to reset so that I can test it out, I want to go ahead and build the last component that we need, which is the loading state. Remember that the loading state is this thing that shows right here. So you want that when the app is still loading, then we want to show some kind of like a skeleton kind of loading, right? So inside the app.jsx, what we're going to do is right around here, we're going to negate this so that we're always seeing the loading state. Oh, is that right? That's not correct. Where is the loading state? Right here. So if initial loading, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to say set initial loading into false. Is that correct? No, what am I doing? Because if initial loading is true, then it shows the loading state. So let's negate this. So no initial loading, then loading state. There we go. So now let's paste this right here, and then let's jump into the loading state right here to build out our loading state. Now this component is going to be completely UI. It has no interactivity. So we're going to say import the logo from /assets /images /icon -logo .svg. Then copy this down. I think 4 is okay. Then units icon. This third one is going to say drop down. And the final one is going to say search. Then at the end of this is icon search. This is going to say icon drop down. And then this is going to say icon units.svg. And then for our return, we're going to return a div with the class name here of min height -screen, and then text -white. And then inside this div, we're going to have another div with the class name of container, and then mx auto, and then padding on the x of 4, and then padding on the y of 6, and max width -7xl. Inside this, we're going to have a header component with the class name of flex, and items-center, then justify -between, then margin bottom of 8. Inside this header, we're going to have a div, and then inside this div, we're going to have an image. The source for this image is going to say the logo. The alt attribute is going to say weather now, and then the class name is going to say width-40. On small screens, we're going to say width-auto. Now I can save that, and this does not exist. Icon logo. Oh, it's called logo.svg, not icon logo. There we go. So that is the first thing that we have in our loading state. Now below this div, but still within the header, we're going to have a button here. This button is going to have a class name of flex, and then items-center, and then space in the x of 2, glass-card, padding of the x of 4, padding of the y of 2, and then rounded-large, and then on hover, bg-white with an opacity of 20, transition-all with a duration of 200, close it out. Inside this, we're going to have our img, and you know what, let's jump into the header. Let's just copy, because it is a bit large. Where is it? Right here. So this image, and then the text, and this image, so copy and then paste it here. But now since we don't have this state value, so we're going to remove this entire thing, including its class names. We don't need even the dynamic thing here, so we can remove it. Just remove it. Just return a string. Okay. I'm not even sure anymore if copying it and then pasting it was faster, but we can save it, and you can see that that is what we have. So this is not interactive because it is technically still loading, right? Now we're going to go below the header. We're going to create another div with the class name of text-center, and then margin the bottom of 8, and then on each one, I think this one is going to be easier to just copy it. So copy and then paste it here for the h1. Below the h1, we're going to have a div with the class name of flex, and then flex-column, then on small screens, flex-row, and then gap of 4, and then max width-md, and then mx auto. Inside this, we're going to have a div with the class of relative, and then flex-1. Inside this, we're going to have the img with the source of search, and then alt attribute is going to be empty, and then the class name is going to be, for this one, let's jump into the search component. What am I typing? into the search so that we can copy this entire thing. Let's just copy this entire thing, the img, and then the input. So copy, and then let's just paste it here because it's faster. And then we don't need the value here, we don't need the on change, we don't need the disable state, and everything else should remain the same. You can save that, and this is it right here. So we can type inside it, but it's not going to do anything. But then now below the input and then below this div, we're going to have our submit button once again, which you can get from the search because it's faster. So just copy this and then paste it here. We don't need the disable state, we don't need the button type of submit, but you can change it into button type of button so that it doesn't trigger any event. And then the text here is just going to say search, like so. Save that. So search is right there. And then we're going to go below two divs, and we're going to have our content. So we're going to turn a div with a class name of grid, and then grid column -1, and then on large screens grid columns -3, and then give it a gap of 6. And then inside this div, another div with a class name of large screens column -span -2, and then space on the y of 6. And then inside this, we are now going to get the current weather. So current weather component, I think is going to be better if we copy and paste it. Can't seem to find it. I can't seem to find the actual div that I want. So let's just type it out. So we're going to turn a div here, not dvi. So div. This div is going to have a class name of glass-card rounded -2xl, padding round of 6, relative, and then overflow -hidden, and then min height dash, and then in square brackets 200 pixels, and then flex, and then items center, and justify center. Inside this div, we're going to have another div with the class name of text center, and then inside this, another div with the class name of flex, and then justify center, and then magic bottom of 4. And then inside this, another div with the class name of flex, and then space on the x of 1. And then inside this, another div with a class name of size -2, then bg-white, and rounded -full, and animate -bounce. And then this is going to have a custom style. So style is equal to, and then open up this object, and we're going to say animation delay. Animation delay, set this into 0 milliseconds, like so. And then this is a self-closing div. Now we can go below this div that ends here, and we're going to actually let's copy it because it's faster. So copy and paste. Now this is the class names are going to be the same, but now it's going to be delayed here by 150 milliseconds. And then this div ends here, copy it down, or rather paste it down one more time. This is now going to be delayed by 300 milliseconds. And why is that? Well, save it, and then you notice that it's just this small bounce animation. Now we're going to go, this div ends here, so below one div, two div, and we're going to turn another div with the class name of text neutral -300, and the text is going to say loading ... Save it, and it's going to have the loading right there. So are you seeing what we're building out now? So we are basically building out the entire application, but the loading state for it, so that when you are loading into the application, it shows you this so that you can see that the application is loading, so that you don't click away too fast. And then now we're going to go below one div, two div, and we're going to create our metrics. So our metrics are going to be as follows. So we're going to create a div with a class name of grid, and then grid columns -2, and then on large screens grid columns -4, and then give it a gap of 4. And then inside this, we're going to create an object and then an array. So this one is going to be fields like. Remember how the metrics work. This one is going to say humidity. The third one is going to say wind. And then the final one is going to say precipitation. And then outside of this, we want to map over them. So for every item that we get back, in this case, I'm calling it a label. We also want to get back the index, and then open this up. So we're going to turn a div with the key of index. And then the class name here is going to say glass-card rounded -xl, and then padding all over the 4, and then close it out. And then inside this div, we're going to have another div with the class name of text neutral -300, and then text-sm, and then margin bottom of 1. Inside this, we're going to show the label. And then below this div, remember that it is also self-closing. We're going to have another div with the class name of text-2xl, and then font dash bold, and then text neutral dash 500. And then this is just going to say minus, just like that. And we can save that. But we have this for our loading state for the metrics. And then obviously next we need to build the daily forecast. So we're going to go right after the closing of this, and then below this div. So we're going to return a div, the class name of class dash card, and then rounded dash XL, and then padding around of 6. Inside this, we're going to have an H3 with a class name of text dash XL, and then font dash semi bold, and then margin bottom of 4, and then text dash white. And then inside this, we're going to say daily forecast, just like that. I don't know whether I capitalize this, so let me just capitalize it. And then inside this, we're going to turn a div, the class name of grid columns dash 2. And then on small screens and above, we're going to say grid columns dash 3. And then on large screens, grid columns dash 7. And then give it a gap of 3. And then inside this, we're going to say array.from, which is something similar that we did. We want to generate an array of 7 items. And then outside of this, dot map, and then underscore, and then get back to index. I feel that I've explained that enough, so I don't have to explain it again. So inside here, we're going to have a div with a key of index, and then the class name here is going to say class dash card, rounded dash large, padding around of 4, text dash center, not white, so text dash center, and then animate dash pulse, close out this div. And then inside this div, we're going to have a div with a class name of height dash 4, and then glass dash card, and then margin bottom of 2, and then rounded. And then this is self-closing, so you're going to go below this div, create another div with the class name of height dash 8, and then glass dash card, and then rounded, and then margin bottom of 3. And then this is also self-closing, so below this, we're going to have another div with the class name of space dash y dash 1. Now this is not self-closing, so inside this div, we're going to return another div with the class name of height dash 4, and then glass dash card, and then rounded. And then now this is self-closing, this is rounded. Now below this div, we're going to return another div with the class name of height dash 3, and then glass dash card, and then rounded, just like that. We can save that, and this is what we have. So basically all those divs that we are creating are these ones right here. Looks nice. And then now we need to build our hourly forecast right here. So for the hourly forecast, we're going to go to the end of this and then count 1, 2, 3. So 3 divs, and then our hourly forecast. So we're going to turn a div with the class name of large call dash span dash 1. And then inside this, we're going to turn a div with the class name of glass dash card, rounded dash XL, and then padding around of 6, and then height dash fit. Inside this, another div with the class name of flex, and items dash center, and then justify dash between, and then margin bottom of 4. And then inside this, we're going to have an H3 with the class name of text dash XL, font dash semi bold, and text dash white. And then this is going to say hourly forecast. Below this H3, we're going to have a div with the class name of glass dash card, and then padding on the X of 3, and padding on the Y of 2, and then rounded dash large. And then inside this, we're going to have a span with the class name of text dash white, which is just going to say a dash, save that. So we have hourly forecast. And then below this span and below 2 divs, we're going to have another div with the class name of space on the Y of 3, and then max height dash 96, and then overflow dash Y dash auto. And then inside here, we're going to create an array. So array dot from, open this up. We want to generate an array of 8 elements, and then dot map, and then get back with underscore, and then comma index, just like that. And then inside here, we're going to turn a div with a key of index, and then the class name is going to be as follows. So flex items center, justify dash between, padding all round of 2, and then animate dash pulse, close it out. And then inside this div, we're going to have another div with the class name of flex and item dash center, and then space on the X of 3. Inside this div, another div with the class name of size dash 6 and glass dash card, and then rounded. This is self-closing, so below this div, another div with the class name of height dash 4, and then width dash 12, and glass dash card, and then rounded. And then below this div now, we're going to have another div, the custom 5-4 with -8, and then glass dash card and rounded. And I think that should be the end of the loading state, because now we have that. Fantastic. So just basically some loading state for your application, so that now if you go back into the app.jsx, we can now remove the negation from here, and our application is going to load in, but I still have an issue. So, I'm going to test it out in a moment. And now that I've seen this, let me correct this typo that I have. So Control-Shift-F, search for connect, that I can get it right there, and then remove the single O. Okay, seems like it has reloaded. Let me go ahead and try to search for a place here. So Nairobi gives me the drop down, select this. It gets the weather, fantastic, but it's getting the wrong icon because there's no sunshine right now. Perhaps I did the wrong thing in the weather icon, because this icon is the weather icon. Oh wait, you know what? I think it's correct. I just realized I think it's correct because there's no nighttime icon. It just clicked. There's no nighttime icon. Yes. Switch to Imperial. You can see it is 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Fantastic. You can search for another place. So if I search for Tuvalu, it should give me something. There you go. 81. Switch back into the proper units, please. There we go. And it is currently raining. Very, very nice. So this is going to be the end of the video. I already submitted this project, so I'm not going to record the part where I'm submitting it. And since I already have a GitHub repository, which you can get in the description, then there's no point for me to create another repository for this one. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something new. And if you did, then I will really appreciate if you like the video and subscribe to the channel as well. It helps greatly. And I will see you in the next one.